Oh, sure. In fact, on Easter Island, they have a rite of passage you may have heard of. When a boy reaches a certain age, there's usually a cohort of boys, a number in the same age bracket, and they have a contest where they must swim out to the bird island off the east end of the tip of Rapa Nui and get an egg of a certain kind of bird. I think it's an albatross, I'm not sure. An egg from the albatross nest, and swim it back to land without breaking it. And of course it's a race. And so the man who wins the race not only attains manhood, but along with it he wins, I think, 20 virgins, something like that. There could be a different number depending upon availability. It was classic, and it actually happened. And those that came in second and third, well, I don't know how they were treated. Maybe they had to try again next year. But as far as surfing, I don't know of any actual practice of such, but I think we all have ridden big waves for the same purpose, but it's only one purpose we ride big waves, and that is to attain manhood within ourselves. I think Fred Van Dyke probably put it better than any one of the big wave pioneers did, and that was when he suggested that all men are latent homosexuals. And I think he felt he was, and so he figured everyone else must be too, because he didn't want to be the only one. But the truth is, I think riding a big wave challenges the soul of a man or a woman, and that you have to defeat fear, and you have to overcome your weaknesses. The ocean is, of course, much more powerful. It has the last word. There's no question. And there are, of course, limits where wisdom enters the equation, and that is also part of becoming a man or a woman, adult woman. And that's to recognize what a human being can do and cannot do with reason and with prudence and with sanity, and still test the edge of the limit. As Laird Hamilton keeps doing with such flair, like a matador. I mean, the cape goes up and the bull goes by and misses him over and over and over. And we did the same thing in the 60s or the 50s even. We rode 30-foot waves for the first time. And we probably came within seconds of dying a dozen times. We meaning a group of young guys who didn't have any clue of what we were really up against. Greg Knoll, Peter Cole, Jose Angel, Peg Kern. And of course, big wave riders today have the same test, except the waves are bigger and their equipment's better, and they have jet skis, and they're all outfitted to deal with even a stronger force, and they can master it because they have a more refined experience. And so they ride bigger waves, and they ride them better, and they're closer to the edge in one sense, but in another, no closer, because we were inexperienced and we didn't know what they know, and we didn't have these flotation vests and jet skis, and we didn't know the currents and the limits, the depths, the power, the whole thing the first time. Boards that were clumsy and heavy and difficult to navigate and slow and so on, whereas now they're on these bullets, and they speed like the speed of light, you know, almost to the, metaphorically speaking, to the limits of what a human being can do. I think they're close. Maybe there's a 100-foot wave out there somewhere, and of course the world of big wave riders is searching for that wave, everyone wants, all of them, I mean, there's maybe 100, want to be the first to ride a 100-foot wave. Why not? You know, it's Everest.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's the ultimate. And, you know, it's not just because it's there, is what Hillary said. It's because man or woman, I think mostly men, because they're more insecure, have a need to prove something to themselves about their power or lack of it. They use surfing to, you put it as a rite of passage. I think that's the idea, you know, to gain confidence in life, to identify themselves, to find out who they are. This experience of coming face to face with a power that can kill you, you know, you see that in human society in many other ways and other examples. Diving to great depth, bungee jumping. Now those extreme sports are exploding all over the world, and you can think of a dozen examples of people right on the edge of dying to do what they're doing, you know, fighting anacondas. You know, crazy stuff. But it's all the same drive and motive. And it's philosophically enriching to put yourself in that position, because you do find out a lot about who you are. And that, I think, is the greater meaning. It's nice to know you're not a latent homosexual.
Another, going back to the tribes, the tribal cultures, another way they had to get to know who they were, and whether it be passage to manhood or not, was the ritual elder, the person who they looked up to. We have lots of words for that now, but guru or guiding light, or just someone
legend.
Legend, yeah.
That's the
ritual elder. I like that. I like the sound of that. But did you have someone who was influential in?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it was this man of Buzzy Trent that I spoke of, that I wrote an article about in Surfer's Journal just a few months ago. He taught me to surf when I was 9. It's a short story. I was out body surfing at Malibu, and there was a few guys out, 1950, and he noticed me swimming along like some sort of water strider, or weakling kid, you know. And he said, "Hey kid, you want to ride?" And he was kind of bored, you know. He'd caught a lot of waves, and I looked at him and I said, you know, kind of questioningly, "Yeah, I sure would." And so he grabbed me and he pulled me up onto his board. He had a 11-foot or something like that Simmons, which is a 24-inch wide board made out of styrofoam and sandwiched with upper and lower layer of plywood so that you could varnish it and keep the water out. It weighed 50 pounds. It had two skegs. It was concave, so the bottom of the board was shaped like that with 2 skegs, one on either side. It was interesting. It was square box type thing with a huge spoon. You could make salad in the spoon of the board, and it was polished of a wood of different type, mahogany, I think. For visual, for looks, to make it look beautiful, and it did look beautiful. Simmons, of course, is famous in the evolution of surfboards. So there I was, like a gecko, you know, holding on with my hands, trying to suck the board, and we started paddling, and we went forward, and he stood up, and I was holding on to the board. I didn't want to stand up. I had fins on, by the way. But he grabbed me by my little chicken bony chest and ripped me off the board and stood me there. And we rode that wave about 100 yards. And near the end, we're coming to the beach, I said, Buzzy, because he'd let go of me by this time. I said, how do we stop? And there was no answer. He wasn't there. I was riding the wave alone. And suddenly, I just fell off. But I was hooked. I mean, that was it. My life changed at that moment. And it was due to Buzzy Trent. And Buzzy affected people like that often. He was charismatic, man. He used to box. He was a Golden Gloves champion in the 50s or 40s, I guess. Somewhere in that time. I think it was 49 or 48. He was Rocky Marciano's sparring partner. He wasn't good enough to be Rocky Marciano. In fact, he got knocked out a lot of times by Rocky Marciano, and he got mad at not being good enough, and one day he was fighting in another ring with another man, and he killed him by mistake. He hit him too hard, and the guy never woke up. And so he quit and decided to go to Ensenada and to fight bulls. And he practiced with bulls that had the horns cut down, rounded off, stubs. And pretty soon he was ostracized by the Mexicans that didn't want this haole intruding into their turf. It made him look bad. So they left him out of the ring, and he was ostracized. And his next episode was lifeguarding in Santa Monica and getting bored with all that and deciding, well, I've got to go to Hawaii and really do something big, hang glide, surf, and he did all those things. He rode the first 30-foot wave, to my knowledge. Now, it may have been Tukahanamoko, in the history books 50 years earlier, embellished by time and history and romance, that a wave that big was ridden before Buzzy did. But I don't think that's true. I think Buzzy actually was the first man to ride a 30-foot wave. In any case, he pioneered the sport of big wave riding in the 50s. And George Downing was right next to him. He called George the Desert Fox because he was so cagey, he was so calculating, he was so clever, and he was so much better of a jockey, of a navigator than Buzzy was. Buzzy was all muscle. Straight ahead, dead ahead. Nothing would get in his way. He would just he would exterminate anything in his way by sheer force. F equals ma. And he had a lot of mass and a lot of acceleration. And so that was Trent, and then Downey, who you talked to, was his cohort in crime, which was really this calculating master of the ocean, kind of like what's the navigator? Not Nainoa Thompson, but his teacher. I think it's Mug Pulag or something like that. He's from the Marshall Islands. I can't pronounce his name. But these are master men of the sea, seamen. And George was, he was the fastest paddler in Hawaii. He was the most stealth surfer, and he knew exactly where to sit in the lineup, and thus the reference to the Desert Fox, who was Rommel in World War II, of course. And the two of them created history. And so I was a product of that history. I was like a child of of those two guys looking up and amazed at what they had begun to do, and wanted to follow suit and do that too. So so I did.
When I asked Mickey Munoz this same question, and mentioned a couple of people, you were one of them. So just wanted to let you know that. It's
Well,
nice things to say about you.
Mickey lived next or up the street from me, and I started surfing about 6 months before he did, and I had this magic board, which I can show you a picture of if you like. I learned to surf on this board pretty fast because it was magic, and better than any other board that people had around me, because it was made by Joe Quigg, and it was the first like short board, a balsa, and the first light board. Where the heck is it? And I loaned it to Mickey, and the damn guy wouldn't give it back to me. He kept it for the longest time, and he learned to surf on it. And it was no time at all until he was surfing better than I was surfing, or maybe the same. But he got to be very good very fast, and so we were kind of like Buzzy and George, but in the next generation. And we were hot doggers, and we were, of course, little Grimmies and tiny surf, and didn't have a glimmer of understanding about what lay ahead. But then when I got to be of age, so to speak, or close to that point of being of age, of that rite of passage that you talked about, I finished college and decided I had to go to Hawaii and find out. So it was that
So in Hawaii, there's
influence that brought me here.
in Hawaii there's well, surf history, that's for sure, but something else now in Hawaii. One thing I find quite interesting was a word I learned here. I learned it before I came here. It's a Polynesian word, but it's used a lot in Hawaiian culture. It's mana, M-A-N-A.
Right.
And I tried to look up some definitions of mana. I talked to people about mana. You don't really have a straight answer for what it is. I think I understand more now. Some of the definitions would be a supernatural force that exists in all things, whether alive or not. And there is often a spiritual connotation to the word mana. Not always, but often.
Oh yeah.
And in some languages, in ancient Greek, it meant mother, but in Polynesian, it was more a word that meant the force in something, and that force can be imparted to somebody else or something else. Here, I heard people talking about the mana of the ocean, getting their strength. Someone told me once he got his mana from the ocean.
Yeah.
His strength carried through to all aspects of his life, and he kept going back to the ocean to get this power. It's
Recharge, yeah.
Do you have a similar view, or can you comment on that word and the ocean in relation to the ocean?
Well, I would say let the force be with you. That's a popular way to express the same thing on television. Star Wars.
Joseph Campbell.
Yeah.
Where that came from.
Oh, is that so?
George Lucas. He was a consultant for George Lucas.
Oh.
He wrote the first Star Wars.
I didn't know that. Well, it's
mythology down.
Yeah. Oh well.
He had Joseph Campbell read his first script to make sure that it followed originally the rules of mythology, and he helped him to.
Oh. I think I now remember that from one of his tapes. I watched 4 hours of his tapes once. Anyway, I feel that such a thing is omnipresent out there in the wild, in the wild ocean, into the wild, whether it's Alaska or the top of Everest. In the case of the ocean, I don't, well, in the case of all wild things where the force is with you, you become wild. And I don't think it's supernatural. I think it's natural, totally natural. I think we're animals. I think we're beasts. And Buzzy was the king of beasts. That's the title of the story of his life. And he tells the story of a boy in Africa having to spear a lion, and that's apparently true. They were expected to kill a lion with a spear before attaining manhood, but of course, so they ran out of lions. And then, of course, the environmental movement came along, and that was no longer appropriate. As a
Did they believe they get their strength from the lion?
I don't know. That's a certainly obvious implication, and it's implied, and there's probably even more to the mythology of that culture, of the what's that tribe in Africa? The in Kenya. Do you remember
The tall ones in red.
Yeah, the tall ones.
Yeah, it's I've been there. I've seen them.
yeah, I can't think of it. I would think of it. The not Maori, but something like that.
Yeah.
They, I'm sure, have a lot of other meanings that are all embedded in that passage, and I think it's a natural outgrowth of life. Of you can see it in a dog when his territory is violated. The hair goes up, the adrenaline fires. You go out in the wild ocean, and your heart beats a lot faster. Your whole physiology changes. You become extremely empowered, and you're much stronger than you are at other times. It's a gladiator kind of thing. It's Herculean. I think all combatants must feel this. In times of peril, of war or contest, their whole body is just struck with a force, and that's mana. And in the ocean, the mana is in the shark. It's in other things around you that have power, the wind, the wave itself, and that hits you with such dramatic energy. To be tumbled by a 50-foot wave, I've never ridden one actually that big, but let's say 30. I've ridden a 30-foot wave. It feels like every part of your body is being torn loose at the same time. You're in this washing machine of power and energy, and you're coming apart. You're just flying over and around, up, down. You have no notion of where you're going, whether you're going to live or not. It's like being tossed into the eye of a hurricane, and having no knowledge of the outcome of where you're going to come out, or a tornado, or Annie, going up and landing in Kansas. It's that story, of being ripped away by nature. Is replete in so many stories of culture and history of man. You find it everywhere, and it is everywhere. Mana. It's within your eyes. It's within your mind. As you sit here, the words may excite you a little. Maybe not. I hope they do, because that's mana, and it's natural. It's part of your heart, part of your soul, part of your mind, all interconnected with nature.
I agree. I agree that I do see it as a natural force rather than supernatural, because by using the word supernatural we disassociate ourselves from those forces and we think of them as unattainable and unreachable. By thinking of them as natural, we are more in tune to being one with them. So I like that you said that. Another there's something special about the ocean being water. You can have mana, energy in all things, but there is something special about the life force of water. Perhaps because we are made up primarily of water, perhaps because we cannot exist without water. It's the blood of lifeblood of all things. In a way, many people, and I go into the ocean. Many people go into the ocean, and as soon as they take that plunge underwater, they have this feeling of ecstasy.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Returning to the womb.
Returning to the womb, yes. I think it's more than that. But there is a special energy there.
Well, we evolved there. Either fresh water or salt water. Probably salt, because our blood's about 10% saline, even now.
Let's take that even one step further now, and as a quantum physicist might look at we'll break down all matter into atoms, and those atoms into protons and electrons spinning around that, and then they'll go into the electron and try to see what's in that, and they'll find there's really nothing in it except energy. Energy goes away and comes back, and when they study that matter, they see that it's waves. Except when they give it attention, it becomes particles. So
they give it
attention. By the observer changes the outcome of the experiment. Often of
That's right.
Quantum physics.
That's
so,
amazing. You know that.
I think it's very important because when you give how is that explained, and I thought it must be very difficult for a scientist to come up with theories that it's human consciousness that changes physical matter. So maybe that physical matter is made up of consciousness. Maybe that energy is a type of consciousness. So that looking at anything really comes down to waves of consciousness that are there, and our relationship to it gives them the form that we see in the world that we live in. So being in the ocean, near the seashore, is one of the few places, perhaps the only place, where we are in a physical wave-like environment that we can see and feel. We can sit in our chair and look at the mountain and imagine everything as waves of consciousness. But we're in a place where we are in a wave, physically wave action that we can feel in a very direct, tangible level. I don't know of anywhere else on the planet we can do that. So it's I sometimes wonder if that helps, if that's one of the reasons we have this feeling of joy when we jump into the water, and is that when we're playing in waves on the shore break.
Well, you've certainly raised some issues I hadn't connected myself, and I agree with your analogies and your conscious, let's say, awareness and recognition of the importance of water and waves and the interaction between those physical properties and our understanding of nature, and how much our understanding does depend upon the way in which we perceive it. Take an electron as you did. If you want to know exactly where it is, you have to stop it, because then it has a place, a position, and you can define its position rotating around the neutron. However, if you do that, if you do stop it to measure where it is, you don't know what its velocity is, because it's, for an instant, it's stopped. Whereas if, on the other hand, you measure its velocity, you don't know where it is, because it's moving so fast. And that was first recognized by a guy named Heisenberg, by the way. It's called the uncertainty principle. And it means that you can't know those two things about an electron. And it's the basis of quantum mechanics, as you probably know since you mentioned quantum mechanics, that there are some things that you change by measuring them. There's other things that you cannot measure, like in a bubble chamber, high-speed muons and other particles, which I've forgotten their names of. There's about 50 or so very ultra-small high-speed particles that are subatomic, that come into existence and go out of existence in a bubble chamber, and you don't know whether they're real or not. I mean, they exist for milliseconds, or actually nanoseconds, which is a billionth of a second. And so you have this muon appear and disappear. And what is that? You know, when it's there, it's energy. And since energy equals mc squared, energy can be converted into mass. And so there's an equivalence between mass and energy. So for a nanosecond, that muon is what we would call real. But for the time before and the time after, it's unreal. It's an imaginary time, which brings in a concept that none of us can imagine, because it's unimaginary. And there you have the edge of where human consciousness and understanding can go. It's like singularity. It's like the starting point. What's your title?
The still point.
The still point. The still point is that electron stopped and measured. And it represents really the chaos in quantum mechanics, because beyond the still point, you're unable to know the boundaries, what came before and what came after, because you can't measure that if you want to know where it was or where it is. And so it goes in and out of existence, and it's like being dead or alive. You know, the void that occurs when you die, the darkness that occurs before you're born. The same void exists when it comes to the Big Bang hypothesis for the origin of the universe. Before Big Bang, which is, I don't want to bore you too much with science, but that was calculated to have been 14 billion years ago at something called Planck time. And they use Planck time because that's very finely divided, and you can say, or they can say, that the universe started at 10 to the minus 43 seconds. And the reason why they cut it that finely is because in the first second, the universe inflated and cooled so dramatically that it dictated the rest of the 14 billion years. Because had it not got beyond that first second, it would have collapsed back into a single point, a still point. And there never would have been a universe. Very, very interesting title, the single point. Because you see, it takes us to the edge of our ability to know. And since we can't go beyond 10 to the minus 43 seconds, scientifically, we're stopped there. And you know, it's interesting that that point was once described by a famous philosopher, Bertrand Russell, something to the effect as follows. He said that science can take us back 14 billion years to the beginning of the universe, to singularity. And there, our knowledge stops, and our ignorance begins, and we call it God. Stephen Hawking talks about singularity, the point of the beginning of the universe, in a similar way. He says that, well, yes, if there are boundaries, then the universe was created at 10 to the minus 43 seconds, 14 billion years ago, and maybe God created it. But if there are no boundaries, then there was no need for creation, because there could have been something before Big Bang. Because it only stands to reason that if the universe is 14 billion years old, why isn't it 15 billion years old? What happened in those billion years before it started? Something. So by deduction, you can take your mind intellectually to before Big Bang. You can take your mind intellectually only now, by conscious deduction, past the single point or the still point. You can do that. But you're entering a world of speculation, of fantasy, of total thought. And that takes us back to Einstein's fantastic analysis of reality, where he said there's only atoms and opinions, because opinions have to do with all consciousness, and it's a reality created by the mind. So all of what we call ideas are creations of the human mind, including God. And if you look at the Sistine Chapel and the finger of God touching the finger of man, behind that beautiful piece of art is a skull, a human skull. That image was created by man. Do it sometime. Look at the painting and you'll see the image of a human skull. Michelangelo. He was afraid to even infer such a thing, because he would have ended up on the stake, along with Tycho Brahe and other astronomers who had the guts to say so. And when Stephen Hawking was at the Vatican giving a lecture to the Pope about singularity, he mentioned the possibility that it had no boundaries. But the Pope did not understand that that meant that there could not be, or no, that there may not be a creator. But that's, of course, exactly what Stephen Hawking was saying, that you don't need a God in a boundless universe. You only need a God in one that is bounded by space and time. And since he doesn't know, he leaves it at that. And since it's unknowable, so do I. I don't know enough to believe or not to believe in God. I mean, you truly are unknowable. You meaning all of us. We're all agnostics and don't know it. And if we think we believe in God, it's only because it's an idea that's in our head. And that idea becomes truth, and we define it as truth because we believe it. But does that make it true?
That's exactly what I said yesterday.
She said yesterday. We talked about the still point. I'm going to tell you why I call it the still point, and it had to do with a dance, and the dance had to do with the way I saw activity on a surfboard in the water, and I had my crazy mind connected all these things together. But I take it much deeper than that. It's from a poem of T.S. Eliot, and I'll just called Burnt Norton, and I'll just read you a part of it. At the still point of the turning world, neither from nor towards, at the still point, there the dance is, neither arrest nor movement, where past and future are gathered, neither movement from nor towards, neither ascent nor decline, except for the point, the still point, there would be no dance, and there is only the dance.
Yeah, it's the North Pole or the South Pole. When you take all of this into the ocean, there I think, you know, it's nice to try and acknowledge that all things are connected. You know, like when a butterfly waves its wings or moves its wings in China, they say, you know, a grape falls in France, you know, and some guy's head. Well, are they really connected? Yeah, but you know, I think there's merit in keeping your feet on the ground. Recognizing that when you go in the ocean and you feel this joy, that it's not necessarily because the water molecule is symmetrical, or when it freezes, it isn't. What I think you are more likely feeling are other emotions. Oh, it's cool, it's free. I'm free at last. Every pore feels the freedom. And then your senses in your mind, which has a genetic memory, right? Go back to the salamander crawling out of the muck, out of the ooze, onto the land, becoming an air-breathing mammal, or first reptile. From an amphibian to a reptile to a mammal. Those actually billions of years, well, let's say hundreds of millions of years, are all encoded in our memory, genetically. And so you sort of wrap it in, you know, you feel the rapture. and those are connections, like the butterfly's wings, you know, and the grape. And you don't really quite understand it, so you feel it, and you let your heart go, and then pretty soon the spirit of your brother is in a turtle, because he died and the turtle lives. And your mind wanders and weaves and floats and sinks and rises. All those things happen, and you're in a romantic trance. You hallucinate yourself, and time stops, and you're in the void, and you're in those words that you were using, that are only words and ideas that only exist in your mind. So you have created what you're believing.
You become what you imagine.
Yes, and it's valid because you created it, and it does exist, and your mind feels it and thinks it. But is it really true? Well, it's not something that can be defined by truth. It exists in your mind as an idea, pure and simple. No big deal. It's no big deal. It's just the way we are. It's wonderful. It's life. It's being in love. You know? Heck, why make a mountain out of a molehill? Although it's fun to do it.
I mean, but isn't it good getting back to in quantum mechanics? That wasn't there experiments where in one what do they call it when they
a cyclotron?
Yeah, they send an electron somewhere and then they'll deflect it, and then at the same time they'll do that same experiment on another part of the planet with another electron, and that electron will take the same change of path without the deflection taking place. I do seem to remember where one electron moved and then another one moved, and that they were watching two electrons, and then they deflected one in a direction,
Yeah.
and the other one, for no reason, moved in the same direction.
Well,
Had a hard time.
you can't really say for no reason.
Well, for the reason that the first one moved.
Yeah.
What was the connection?
Well, we don't know,
Yeah, so
but
that's the-
but again, all things are connected, and it's preposterous and presumptuous to think we understand all those connections. We're barely out of the Dark Ages, you know.
Let me ask you one more thing, because we're soon out of time on this.
Change it.
No, it's just a minute.
It's 1 minute left.
Okay, yeah. Well, let me ask you one more.
Quickie. Okay, I'll give you a quick answer.
Cézanne said that art is a harmony parallel to nature. I've read, and we've read, it's not a new idea, that surf is an art form, being in the waves is an art form.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
You're an artist.
Kawabunga. You know that word? Yeah. Oh yes, there's this great flair, you know, and that's where Buzzy wanted to be a matador. The cape, the red cape, the nostrils, that blood spurting out of his back, you know, those things. All part of it. Art.
Thank you. I agree. I think we have the same views on a lot of things. I like to hear you have a very good way of expressing yourself.
Well,
I hope you don't think I'm too far reaching to try to connect so many
No.
things. It's
No,
more to provoke thought than anything else.
Oh, absolutely not. In fact, you're one of the first to be doing it, with me at least. I don't find a mind around me very often that is as liberal and as facile and as far-reaching as yours. It's very exciting. I mean, you're obviously a brilliant person, and you ever read Dean Koontz, by the way?
No.
Oh, you haven't? He's